Alright, welcome back to Hi Guys, BDR here. You know, time for an overview video. I'm going to be doing one on the Lich. Lich just recently came out this past Friday. Now let's talk about it. Now, first, before we get into the Lich stuff, the third Naramicon is out, the Klaatu's Naramicon. In order to complete this quest, you have to complete the, the More Skulls quest at More Skulls, the one where you have to, like, kill the Colossal Vordred, a bunch of times to get the, So, here's the requirements for Klaatu's Naramicon. Bone Dust, you have to go kill Imperial Nox, which is all the way in the back. That's kind of like the best way right now to get Bone Dust. Shadow Lich is from the Shadowfall rep shop. Lich of the Stone, you have to go all the way to Darkovia Forest and kill the Lich of the Stone to get his armor. And Sapphire Orb, you have to kill the Legion Lich Lord 113 times, basically. And Written Exam, I mean, all you have to do is just, like, just click on this desk right here, the one where the mouse is at, and just click it and you'll get the Written Exam. And with that, you'll get the Klaatu's Naramicon. Alright then, let's go to, More Skulls. Alright then, so we're at More Skulls, the quest right here. We will rebuild, that's the name of the quest. Yeah, you have to complete this quest first before you can actually see the Naramicon stuff over at, Necro Project. Otherwise, you won't see it at all. You have to complete this quest first. The adjusted, the one that doesn't give you the Friday the 13th badge. Once you're all done, you got all 3 Naramicons, just come right here, and, there you go. The requirements, rank 10 Doomwood, all that, all 3 Naramicons. The rank 10, Grimskull Trolling, right then and there. So, yeah. Alright then, I guess you could, talk about the skills again, since we already talked about them. The auto attack is Hex, applies Death Blight to humans in 8-second DLT that stacks to 25. Undead Assault deals double damage if Ex Mortis is active. Alright, apply Wither, 20 mana, 5-second cooldown, long range, 1 target. Don't forget, Undead Assault is 20 mana, 6-second cooldown. Now, Wither applies Wither for 8 seconds, reducing your target's outgoing damage by 40% and crit chance by 20%. If Ex Mortis is active, applies Necrotic Curse for 8 seconds, reducing your target's magic resistance by 40% and decay for 2 seconds, negating all non-lifesteal healing received. Rank 3 skill, Vital Sacrifice, 1.5-second cooldown, short range, that deals damage to yourself. Convert your life force and restoring, 20 mana. If Ex Mortis is active, applies Necrotic Edge, increasing your crit chance by 20% and reducing mana cost by 25% for 10 seconds. Your rank 4 passives. Army of the Dead, 40 mana, 3-second cooldown. Applies Deathly Frenzy, increasing your outgoing damage by 150% for 10 seconds. You conjure your darkest magic, applying Ex Mortis, which empowers the next skill that you use. And finally, rank 10, Beyond Death, apply, Survive Death, negate that instance of damage and apply Survive Death, fully restoring your health and mana. This effect can only occur once every 45 seconds. So what this class wants you to do is that, you want to press your 5 as soon as possible, and then, activate your other skills as well to get the extra, effects, to get the full effects off. Alright then, let's go on to combos and enhancements. Yes, that is my AC in the background. That is the AC in the background. It is hot. Gotta blast the AC. Alright then, here's the build for Lich. Ravenous for damage. Got Wizard right there. Lammet to boost our crit chance. And Examine for less mana cost because, you gotta look at this. That's a lot of mana right there. Alright then, as you can see, they didn't really add any new skeletons. The same skeleton from the Necromancer class. Okay. Alright then, for your combo, what you want to do here is 5, 4, 5, 3, 5, 2, and then repeat the combo. Now the thing about Lich is that, you want to press your 5 as much as you can. You got to remember that your 2 is your main damage dealer. As you can see, a, a 42k right there. We got Wither to give us a lifesteal and apply the debuffs. And then we got 2 for basically our nuke. Necrotic Edge to lower the mana cost and increase our crit chance. Then we just Ex Mortis again. There you go, a 50k. So that's pretty much the main point. Just like, you want to do, before you hit your 2, you want to, activate Ex Mortis again. Low in HP. And then finally, bam, a 68k right then and there. So a minute, 718,000. Usually the top soloing classes you clear this under like 50 seconds or like under a minute. This class might be like a bit slower than them, but it's still a pretty good soloing class. Pretty much, a great substitute if you don't have access to Chronos or Void High Lord or Chaos Avenger. So in terms of soloing, pretty good DPS soloer. Alright then, let's move on to a human fight so we could utilize the Hex ability. Alright guys, so we're fighting a human, our ranks. May not be the best human boss, but I just want, a sponge boss at this point. And AQRs, but Pepperidge Farm remembers he used to be a pretty, hard boss to beat. That's just since you had no choice but to solo him. That was your only option. So here we go. We're here to utilize the Hex ability, which applies Death Blight to humans, an 8-second DOT that stacks 25. Alright then, let's get started. And yeah. Throughout the fight, the DOT is going to increase as time goes on. We're already at, 2.4, 2.5, 4.8. Wow. 6.8. 8.8. It's just, wow. 11k DOTs. And there you go right there. We were getting 8.8 DOTs. This class, against humans could really show off. You could fully utilize the Hex ability. As you go into like a longer fight against a human, you could probably reach like 20 to even 40k DOTs with the auto attack. Pretty much it. Alright then, let's move on to farming. This class is a single target class, so no, don't use it for farming. Alright then, let's move on to survivability. Alright, in terms of survivability, you do have to watch out for this class because if you're going to fight like a super hard boss, let's just say Primarch or, Legion Lich Lord, this class can, get squished on. I mean, we just triggered the survive death, but, we have to watch our HP. Damn. HP while it happens, so we do have to, oh, damn. Watch our HP type of stuff. Damn. Chill on me, chill. Damn, and there you go. We just went through war with, Colossal Primarch. In terms of survivability, it's a pretty squishy class against, hard-hitting bosses like Primarch, Legion Lich-Lord, Icewing, etc. This class can get easily one-shot, two-shotted by those types of bosses. Alright then, let's move on to support, and then final thoughts. Oh, wait. Alright then, in terms of support, you have Wither, which can reduce your opponent's, damage, chances, crit chance, dodge, and if Ex Mortis is active, it could also reduce your target's magic resistance and decay for 2 seconds. So in terms of support, it is bringing support to the party. Some support. Alright then. The pros about Lich is that, it's a good DPS soloer. The numbers that it was reaching earlier with Ravenous, really makes it, a good soloer. It could reach like, 40 to 60k, and I'm pretty sure, You know, juiced up, it could probably reach around 70 to 90k, whatnot. That's kind of like its main line of damage to just be main line of work is just be a damage dealer. It also introduces, you know, the survive death mechanic, aka second life, which is pretty good, you know, getting that second life and getting your HP and mana, you know, back to full is pretty nice. And it's easy to use. And also one more thing, it also has a stackable DOT that applies to humans, making human fights, you know, faster to clear. That's pretty much all that I have, you know, for pros. All right then. The cons about Lich is that, you know, you have to grind rank 10 Grimskull trolling. I understand to some people that may sound nitpicky, but that just seems like, you know, the general complaints I've heard about Lich is that, you know, rank 10 Grimskull trolling. The other one is that its defenses are quite squishy, as you saw with the survivability portion of the video. We were going to war with Primarch, you know, even with Ravenous active, and you know, the last one, you know, the Death Blight, it only applies to humans, so so if you're fighting a non-human monster, you're not going to get that stackable DLT, which is quite a shame. All right then. My final verdict about Lich is that Lich is a good DPS soloer that can also apply debuffs and also has a stackable DOT against humans, which can make human fights, you know, faster to clear. I recommend getting this class if you're like a huge fan of Necromancer back in the day, or if you're looking for something new to try out. Alright then, that's pretty much been it for the Lich overview. Make sure to like, share, subscribe for more content, whether it be AQ roles, WWE tier lists, etc. You know, more streams on the way from Francisco, you know, roll to 400. And yeah, hi guys, out.